On a foggy morning, November 27, 1989, the air at El Dorado International Airport in Colombia hung heavy with an unspoken dread. A Boeing 727 stood silently on the tarmac, a steel beast primed for its domestic flight to Alfonso Bonilla Aragon Airport in Cali. Among the initial passenger list loomed a name that carried the weight of fate: Cesar Gaviria, former minister and presidential candidate of Colombia, a man whose death could rewrite a nation's history. But as the dawn broke, a shadowy figure slipped through the dim light, handing a black suitcase to a 17-year-old boy, a pair of innocent eyes unaware they'd just grasped the hand of death itself. 5 minutes after takeoff, the sky shuddered. A deafening explosion tore through the heavens, shredding the plane into a fiery wreckage as black smoke spiraled upward, mingling with the ghostly screams of the damned. 107 souls aboard were incinerated in an instant, and jagged debris rained down like a curse, claiming 3 more lives below curious onlookers who'd unknowingly stared into the abyss. This was Colombia's second deadliest aviation nightmare at the time. Yet, strangely, Cesar Gaviria, the hunted prey, was absent from that doomed flight, as if he'd heard the reapers whisper and stepped back from the edge. Investigations later unveiled a name that chilled the world: Pablo Escobar, the phantom king of narcos who turned the sky into a blazing graveyard. Who was Pablo Escobar? And why did that plane erupt into ashes mid-flight? I'm Wind, and you're listening to Mystic Echoes. Hit like and subscribe to uncover more haunting tales. According to the New York Times, El Dorado Airport pulsed as the lifeblood of South America, a hub where passengers and cargo flowed ceaselessly. That morning, the Boeing 727-21 waited on the apron, poised for a journey of just over an hour, a journey no one knew would end in oblivion. At Gate 6, passengers shuffled forward, papers trembling in their hands under the blank gazes of staff. Most were Colombians, joined by 2 unsuspecting Americans. Cesar Gaviria's name lingered on the original manifest like a specter, but he never boarded, a twist of fate that spared him from the jaws of death. In total, 101 passengers and 6 crew members stepped into the belly of the beast, oblivious to the shadow already seated among them. Denaira, known as Luck USA, Pablo Escobar's cold-blooded assassin, had woven a perfect trap. He reserved seats 18A and 18K, positioned directly above the plane's main fuel tank, where flames could feast most ferociously. Before departure, he arrived with a suitcase. Not cash, not secrets, but a bomb, silent, ruthless, and primed to unleash hell. Denaira's calculations were diabolical. The bomb sat atop the fuel tank, ready to ignite a chain of destruction. A flawless plan. He bribed airport staff, slipping the lethal luggage past every checkpoint without a whisper of suspicion. But Denaira wasn't fool enough to walk into his own grave. Instead, he chose a pawn, Alberto Brito, a 17-year-old Colombian boy with a heart too pure to doubt. "It's just a recorder," Denaira murmured, his voice smooth as poison. "Turn it on to capture the Americans' chatter nearby." With that, he vanished like a wraith, leaving the boy to carry doom in his hands. At 7:13 a.m., the Boeing 727 roared to life, clawing its way into the sky. 5 minutes later, cruising at 3.9 kilometers with a speed of 794 kilometers per hour, Alberto followed his instructions. He pressed the record button, innocent and trusting, unaware he'd just unleashed a nightmare. Flames erupted beneath seat 18, spreading like a vengeful spirit, devouring the wings and fuselage. The plane became a blazing phoenix, careening through the air in helpless agony. The fire licked at the fuel tank, and thousands of liters of gasoline ignited in a second, monstrous explosion, far fiercer than the first. The aircraft's body cracked apart, the cockpit tearing free like a severed head. The Boeing disintegrated, its fragments shrieking through the wind, scattering across a vast expanse near Socha. Below, 3 curious souls gazed skyward, never suspecting death was plummeting toward them. Shards of metal pierced their flesh, their blood seeping into the cold earth. No miracles came. No hope remained. All 107 aboard and 3 below perished in a storm of fire and steel, a tragedy born from a single suitcase, a whispered lie, and the merciless will of Pablo Escobar. The death toll from the catastrophe climbed to a staggering 110 souls. A desperate search for the victims unfolded across the rugged hills surrounding the crash site, a sprawling radius nearly 10 kilometers south of Bogotá. But what remained was unrecognizable, charred fragments of humanity lost to the inferno. Luggage and belongings were reduced to a smoldering heap of ash, a silent testament to the lives snuffed out. The government and the victims' families demanded answers, their cries for truth echoing through a nation gripped by grief and rage. According to the New York Times, top experts from the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration and Colombia's National Transportation Safety Board descended on the wreckage, piecing together the shattered Boeing in a grim attempt to unravel its fatal secrets. 9 days later, terror struck again. A bus loaded with a ton of explosives detonated outside the Bogotá headquarters of Colombia's Administrative Security Department, shaking the city to its core. Richard Hall, an explosives expert tasked with investigating both atrocities, stepped into the chaos as part of an American delegation. The U.S. had skin in the game. 2 of the plane's victims were American citizens. Under the 1986 Anti-Terrorism Act, murdering U.S. nationals abroad was a crime, and the 1956 federal law made bombing a civilian aircraft an unforgivable sin. Hall scoured the debris, collecting scraps of evidence and sending them to labs for analysis. Among the twisted metal, he spotted a telltale sign, a dented section of the fuselage, the fingerprint of a high-powered explosive. His conclusion was chilling. A small device had detonated beneath a seat near the fuel tank, ripping through critical components and sparking a fire. A second, cataclysmic blast followed as the fuel ignited, tearing the plane apart in midair. The mastermind behind this horror was identified as Dandin I. Muñoz Mosquera, a loyal henchman of Pablo Escobar. Tried in a second hearing, Mosquera faced justice, with Hall testifying as an explosives expert in both proceedings. Under pressure, Mosquera confessed, the bombing of Flight 203 was ordered by Escobar himself, a calculated strike to assassinate Cesar Gaviria. The revelation ignited a firestorm of outrage. To target one man presumed to board that plane, over 100 innocent lives were extinguished, a massacre born from cold ambition. Who was Pablo Escobar? And why was he hellbent on killing Cesar Gaviria? Unearthed files from classified archives paint a grim portrait. Born in 1949 to a modest Colombian family, Pablo Escobar clawed his way from obscurity through petty crimes, smuggling cigarettes, peddling fake lottery tickets. By the early 1970s, he'd graduated to car theft, occasional kidnappings, and extortion, before plunging into the cocaine trade. Teaming up with local criminals, he forged the Medellín Cartel, a ruthless empire built on blood and powder. Under Escobar's iron grip, the cartel sourced raw materials from Bolivia and Peru, refining them into cocaine in Colombia's jungles. Early on, they smuggled the drug into the U.S. inside plane linings, raking in up to $500,000 per flight. In May 1976, Escobar and his crew were caught red-handed with 17 kilograms of cocaine fresh from Ecuador. When bribery failed to sway the judge, he ordered the execution of 2 arresting officers. Astonishingly, he walked free, untouchable, and emboldened. From there, Escobar's reign grew darker. He wielded a brutal mantra, plata o plomo, silver or lead, offering officials a choice between bribes or bullets. His influence soon stretched to the U.S., spinning webs of smuggling routes through South Florida, California, and beyond. The Medellín Cartel swelled into a monstrous machine,
controlling over 80% of America's cocaine market by the mid-1980s.
At the height of his power, Escobar's fleet hauled 11 tons of cocaine per commercial flight into the U.S. His brother later revealed they'd even acquired 2 small submarines to ferry their deadly cargo. The cartel's reach sprawled to Mexico, Puerto Rico, and Asia, amassing wealth beyond comprehension. At its peak, the Medellín Cartel reportedly pulled in over $70 million a day, a fortune built on addiction and death. But why Gaviria? Escobar saw him as a threat, an incorruptible force rising to challenge his empire. To protect his throne, he'd burn the skies and bury the innocent, leaving a legacy written in fire and fear. The Medellín Cartel's wealth was so obscene they spent over $1,000 a week just on rubber bands to bundle their cash, stashing it in warehouses like some twisted treasure hoard. Yet, every year, rats gnawed away 10% of their fortune, a fitting irony for an empire built on filth. By then, Escobar's net worth soared to an estimated $30 billion, thrusting him into the ranks of the world's richest and most dangerous men. In the early 1980s, his sprawling domain included 96 estates and villas, a mid-sized plane, 6 smaller aircraft, a helicopter, an armored car, and a sprawling 60-acre zoo, an empire of excess dripping in blood money. But Escobar wasn't just a ruthless gangster. He was a master manipulator, crafting a saintly facade to mask his sins. He poured cash into housing projects, schools, and playgrounds for the poor, especially in his hometown, winning the hearts of the downtrodden. The Medellín Cartel became folk heroes to some, their generosity a calculated bribe. This wasn't charity, it was a shield. The people he saved became his eyes and ears, hiding him from the law's grasp. And when opposition arose, Escobar turned to the very children of those he'd helped, slipping them cash to silence his enemies with bullets. Yet, even this twisted philanthropy wasn't enough. Escobar craved power, ultimate power. He dreamed of ruling Colombia as its president. In 1982, his carefully polished image as a savior of the poor propelled him into politics, landing him a seat as an alternate congressman for the Liberal Party. But his mask couldn't hold forever. In August 1983, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, Colombia's newly appointed Minister of Justice, stepped into the spotlight. Fearless and unrelenting, he exposed Escobar as the kingpin of the Medellín Cartel, shattering the illusion of the benevolent benefactor. The revelation stunned the nation. Escobar's saintly reputation crumbled, and Bonilla became a marked man. 6 months later, Escobar unleashed his vengeance, ordering the minister's assassination for 500,000 pesos. The hit cemented his infamy, branding him the world's most notorious drug lord. Colombia's laws could no longer ignore him. By the fall of 1983, after relentless investigation, a nationwide manhunt was launched for Escobar and his inner circle. He fled to Panama, a fugitive king still pulling strings from the shadows, directing his empire through secret channels. To counter Colombia's crackdown, Escobar wielded his signature tactic, plata o plomo, silver or lead. He showered government officials and military brass with bribes, turning them into puppets shielding his cartel. For the incorruptible, he offered a different deal: intimidation or death. His money paved a bloody path, corrupting Colombia's political machine until it rotted from within. Those who dared defy him faced savage retribution. In March 1989, 2 politicians were ambushed at El Dorado Airport, one killed, the other maimed. 5 months later, Luis Carlos Galán, a presidential candidate from the Democratic Party, fell to a hail of bullets mid-speech, his crime proposing reforms like extraditing criminals to the U.S. Then came Cesar Gaviria, a former minister and rising star, whose staunch anti-drug stance made him Escobar's next target. When word spread that Gaviria would board Flight 203 on November 27, 1989, Escobar saw a golden opportunity. His crew meticulously planned the Boeing 727's destruction, a spectacle meant to bury his enemy in flames. But at the 11th hour, Gaviria changed his plans, slipping through death's fingers. According to Killing Pablo by Mark Bowden, whispers suggest U.S. anti-narcotics agents tipped him off, a secret lifeline that spared his life. In 1990, Gaviria won Colombia's presidency in a landslide, launching a fierce crusade against the drug trade. Under mounting pressure, Escobar struck a deal with Colombian officials in 1991. He'd serve 5 years in prison, but on his terms. He built his own jail, a luxurious fortress dubbed La Catedral, complete with every comfort a kingpin could demand. The tale of Flight 203 faded into the shadows, but its scars lingered, etched into the hearts of those who lost everything. Over 100 victims' families later received reparations from a national welfare fund established in 2011, 24 million pesos each, roughly $11,000. A pittance for lives stolen by a madman's ambition, a haunting reminder of the day the sky burned.